Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Son of Yisrayl, Isayah, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Son of Yisrayl, and I'd like to serve you as a priest starting very soon. It's a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrael now entering the sanctuary. I now present one of the sons of Yisrael, Obadiah Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I'll be talking about Yahweh's protection against nuclear war is conditional. Yahweh's inspired scriptures show us absolutely that we'll have nuclear war in this generation that will darken the sun and burn the earth in 1 hour. Yahweh's protection against nuclear war is conditional, and it's only if we keep His laws, His statutes, and His judgments. Yahweh can save us from this prophesied time of trouble that the world has never seen if we put away our sins. And if you please turn over in your book of Yahweh to Isaiah chapter 59. It's on page 567 and verse 1 and 2. And says, Behold, Yahweh's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, nor his ear heavy that cannot hear, but your own iniquities have separated you from your father, and your own sins have caused him to hide his face from you, so he will not listen. And also, if you could please turn over to Mattithyah, book of Mattithyah. And it's on page 705, and it's Micaiah chapter 3 and verse 4. And it says, Then they will cry unto Yahweh, but he will not hear them. He will hide his face from them at that time because of the evil they have done. From these two scriptures, we can clearly see that Yahweh will not listen to us because we have sinned, and when we sin, we cut ourselves off from Yahweh. Through the 6,000 years of history, the scriptures show us that Yahweh, the creator of heaven and earth, has been warning mankind about this way they chose through his prophets. And we can read about how Cain chose this way. If you please turn over in your book of Yahweh to page 3. And that's Genesis chapter 4. Now look at verse 6 and 7. And we'll go over to verse 14. And verse 6 says, So Yahweh said to Cain, Why are you angry? Why are you downcast? If you do righteousness, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do righteousness, sin is crouching at your door. The desire to sin is with you, but you must overcome it. And if you could go over to verse 14, it says, Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall not be seen by your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth, for there shall be continual war, vengeance, and retaliation. This way of vengeance and retaliation is what we see in the world today. Mankind has never possessed such great destructive weapons until this generation that started with the birth of the last day's witness and the computer. I came across an article that said, Atomic Armageddon is just 30 minutes away, and I got an excerpt from it that says, U.S. and Russia are once again pumping up the nuclear arsenal, moving the doomsday clock 3 minutes before midnight. We can clearly see that the end is near. From what we've just read, we can clearly see that the end is near. And also do what our high priest Yeshua Messiah told us in Mattithyah 24. Please turn over to Mattithyah 24. And it's on page 753. And look over to verse 32 and 33. And it says, "Now learn a parable from the fig tree. When its branch becomes tender and puts out leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things, know that his coming at the end of the age is near, at the very door." Despite all that, Yeshua also tells us to rejoice when we see all these things occur. If you could please turn over to Luke. It's on page 808, Luke 21 and verse 28. And it says, when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. The last day's witness, Cecil Hawkins, has shown us the 10 kings prophesied to bring about nuclear war in this generation. And protection is only offered at Yahweh's house. There's no other place you can get protection. The way of life offered in Yahweh's house guarantees eternal life with practicing righteousness. Yahweh does not force us to go his way, but gives us a choice. And if you could please look over to Deuteronomy and chapter 30 and look at verse. It's on page 173, and look at verses 15 and 19. And it says, "See, I have set before you this day life by righteousness and death by destruction." And verse 19 says, "I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you this day, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses, because you're free agents to make your own choice between righteousness and evil. Therefore choose life, so both you and your children may live." We should be rejoicing that Yahweh's kingdom is soon to take over and eradicate all the misery, pain, and suffering. When they'll proclaim peace, true peace, then sudden destruction will come upon them. As we can read in 1 Thessalonians, and it's on page 930. That's 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 3. It says, For they will say, peace, true peace, then sudden destruction will come upon them. As labor pains upon a woman with child, they will not escape. Yahweh, through his prophets, prophesied that mankind would use these weapons that could destroy your life. Before Yahweh steps in, only a few will be left, and all hope of life will be gone. Like in the days of Noah, only a handful of people will be saved. Efforts of peace will continue for a while, but only through the same means that have always brought about more war. The leaders of our worldly government think that all the nations will be afraid to start a nuclear war due to its consequences. They'll think that there is peace, but then sudden destruction will come upon them. And that's all I have. Could please stand. May I bless your understanding.
It's a privilege and honor to turn over to the next speaker, the great Deacon Abba Shalom Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May peace be with each and every one of you. Well, I hope everyone did their homework that Pastor gave us, to read the book of Job. And Job talks about something that's very important, in our everyday lives. It's because every time we sin, we affect the microbes, these small little microbes, that Job talked about, and it was talked about in that book. Let's go ahead and turn over to Daniel 9. That's where we're going to start today. And Pastor's been going over Daniel 9, and all the prophecies, and the prophecies in Daniel, very recently. And Daniel was a very righteous man. He was someone that was trained in the laws of Yahweh. He was trained and raised up in them. And he could understand the benefits, that came from keeping Yahweh's laws. And he was concerned about how the people, they weren't keeping Yahweh's laws. They could see, the curses that were coming upon them and what dirty occurred. If you look in Daniel 9, 1 through 22, that's Daniel's prayer. That's the confession that he was making, to Yahweh and telling Yahweh, how that they had sinned, they didn't keep Yahweh's laws, and I can understand why the curses that was coming upon the children of Israel were occurring, because of the laws that were breaking. Let's go and look at verse 11, because you can see this in verse 11. Daniel 9:11. It says, "Yes, all Israel has transgressed your law and turned away." They are breaking the laws of Yahweh. They're sinning. "And has refused to obey your voice. Therefore the curses vowed against us," the curses prophesied against us. These curses were prophesied. It wasn't something that was new to them. These were in the book of Yahweh. It says, "The curses vowed against us, written in the Torah, which was given through Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, are poured upon us," or allowed to occur, because we have sinned against you. Okay, remember those curses, the curses that were prophesied, to occur. They're written in Deuteronomy. You want to turn over to Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 28. And these are all the curses, these are the curses that would come. These are the curses that were prophesied to come from the breaking of Yahweh's laws. If you look in Deuteronomy 28, from 15, basically to the end of the chapter, those are all the curses that were coming. If you look at verse 14, it says, "For if you diligently observe and do all of Yahweh's law, then you will not turn aside from any of the laws which I command you this day, to the right hand nor to the left, by going after any god else to serve it." Remember the gods, evil like the gods. Remember in Genesis 3:5. "However, if you do not obey Yahweh your Father, and do not carefully follow all of his laws, his statutes, which I command you this day, then all these curses will come upon you and accompany you." And then you can see the curses there. If you look, it lists all the curses, like in verse 59. Yahweh your Father will bring against you, or allow, to occur, the fearful plagues, the prolonged disasters, and the severe and lingering illnesses. You could see that in the world today, the STDs and so forth, that they have no cure for. Okay, so the gods in verse 14, those are the same ones in Genesis 3:5, the evil like the gods. Mankind killed Yahweh's servant Abel. It was Cain's followers. They killed Yahweh's servant Abel, to try to squash out the house of Yahweh. And Cain led the rest of the world into that God worship. From that God worship, there came the bloodshed. And that bloodshed came upon the earth, and actually it defiled the earth so much that it caused the second flood. And that was the flood of Noah. Mankind defiled the earth so much the microbes couldn't support the earth. Remember the microbes that pastors were talking about? These are the ones that support the earth. They live in the firmament. They support life. All the life on the earth. And Yahweh set them there to protect mankind. But they couldn't support life anymore. So that's that caused the second flood, because mankind, they wasn't keeping Yahweh's laws. The bloodshed, the murder, and all these things, it caused that flood. And because they didn't keep Yahweh's laws, that was the curse, that occurred. And this is the same thing that we could see in Daniel's time period. Daniel could see, the curses that were coming upon, the children of Israel because they weren't keeping Yahweh's laws. Remember, Pastor brought out, the first flood, and science can prove it, that the first flood, whenever the Sons of Yahweh, they turned themselves into gods, and they defiled the earth, their war games. Remember the dinosaurs and all these things, and that bloodshed, it allowed, it defiled the earth, and, Yahweh had to get rid of that stuff, in order for his plan to go through. That was the first flood, and then the earth became defiled again, and then there was a second flood. But the only people who lived through the second flood were Noah and his family. And remember, that family, Yahweh allowed the righteous genes to be in that family, in that bloodline, so that it was that little bit of righteousness that stuck with the people. And that was what allowed to, bring the Bible back out of captivity. That was, and to keep the earth from getting, to that state again. And it's getting to that state now. That little bit of righteousness was passed down to the Hebrew people, like the American Indians, to respect the land, to work with the land, not to use the land, and as Pastor says, to rape the land, but to work with it, to help the land, to give back, or as, like they said, give back to the earth so the earth will respect you. They call it Mother Nature. But that's what they were talking about, is respecting the microbes, the basic things that support life, and that's the knowledge that they had, and you can still see this, in the latest incident with them, in the Dakota pipeline. I got an article here. Yeah, it's about the Dakota pipeline protest became a Native American cry for justice. Okay, and it shows, how they know that, if this pipeline goes through, if there's a leakage, there's something that occurs, that'll actually, defile their water supply. They'll actually, and that's what they're fighting for right now. In the article, it says the Dakota access is halted by its fate, by no means is settled. It's the first major pipeline constructed since the Keystone XL perished. And Native Americans were not the first to oppose it. Yet thousands of American Indians set up camp on the open prairie demanding that their drinking water will be protected. Says the pipeline protesters, they call themselves the water protectors, because it actually says here in the article, it says, the pipeline was initially intended to cross the Missouri River at a different point, 10 miles upstream of Bismarck, the state capital. The pipeline was later routed half a mile upstream of the Standing Rock Reservation. So they could see that it would affect their capital if they put it in that area. So they moved it back, but it's still going to affect the water supply of the American Indians now. And that's what they're protesting against. Is if that leaks, it's gonna ruin their way of life. It says 41% of whom 41%. No, it's home to 8,200 people. 41% of whom live below the poverty level. People on Standing Rock rely on the Missouri River for their drinking water, their irrigation, and their fish. Okay, so if this pipeline leaks, if there's something wrong with the pipeline, it's gonna contaminate that their life, the way they live, to where it's gonna make it hard for them. That's what they're fighting against right now. You can see that knowledge, of how they know, to avoid certain things, that will destroy the earth. Anyway, let's go back to Daniel 9. Go back to Daniel 9, and 9:11, it talks about how Israel transgressed your law, turned away, and refused to obey your voice. And then the curses that were prophesied against them, they were coming to pass. And you can see the whole world, they've turned to sin in these last days, and that's what's bringing the curses against them in the world today. It's that sin, and the bloodshed that's occurring on the earth. If you look to Daniel 8:23, it says, in the last days of their kingdom, and this the last days, when the transgressors have reached their fullness, the king of fierce expression, the skilled in trickery and deception. We can see that trickery and deception, coming forth from Yada. It's being taught by Yada, who sits on the 7 hills of Rome, the Vatican, and they're leading the people into this sin. If you look at Daniel 9:26, says, "And after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off without a successor. The people of the prince that will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end will be with the flood until the end of the war. Desolations are determined. And he will confirm a covenant with Rabin, or with many Rabin, for 1 week, 7 years. Okay, in the midst of the week, he will cause the sacrifice of the oblation to cease. And instead, he will cause the prevalence of the Lord of heaven until the destruction, that destruction is going to occur. The destruction as determined will be poured out upon the desolator." You can see that's occurring in the world today. That 7 years covenant, that's getting ready to start back up. Created by Yada. Once again, it was created by Yada. Vatican, who's ruling the whole world. And they're trying to bring that peace, true peace. But remember, if you look at the last word of verse 27, the desolator, the desolation, that they will bring upon the earth, the destruction. And they'll be able to destroy the earth before, the microbes are so bad to where there'll be that third flood. Anyway, if everyone will please stand. I'd like to turn it over to Great Kohan Parayah.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I'm going to be probably going a little rapidly, so I'll try to make everything as clear as I can, but this is going to be a continuation of what I spoke on last time. And the title it's called Prophecy and Promises, Not One of These Will Fail. And if you remember the little video demonstration that we had last time, really demonstrated the so-called protection this world has. They trust in their government leaders, they trust in their religions, and when everything was all said and done, the only thing they had to do was pray. That was what the president told them to do, was pray. Because their governments failed and their religions failed. And this is the way that the world is going. Their governments and their religions are going to fail. And we've got to remember the time period that we're in. Be turning over to II Timayah, chapter 3 and verse 1. And we'll be here on page 938. II Timayah, chapter 3, verse 1. And we're told here, it says, also know this, that in the last days perilous times will come. And look at the side note there, the side note G over there for perilous. And you can see it means through the idea of reducing the strength, dangerous, furious, and fierce. And I think we can all agree that the time period that we are in at this time is quite dangerous. It's a fierce time period. There's sickness, disease, incurable diseases. Violence abounds all over the place. And you can't get away from it, but this is this system, the continual war, vengeance, and retaliation, this way of Cain that was from the beginning. And it also means now to have peril. It does mean, something that is likely to cause injury, pain, harm, or loss, and the possibility that you will be hurt, killed, or that something unpleasant or bad will take place. But continuing on here in verse 2, here it says, and this verses 2 through 4 show the character of this world. Men will be lovers of themselves, covetous, boasters, backbiters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents. And the disobedient to parents is actually getting worse and worse. As each passing day goes, it gets much worse. Without natural affection, truce breakers, brutal, despisers of those who are righteous. We don't see any of that going on, I don't think. Traitors, betrayers, headstrong, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of Yahweh. And this is what is put forth from this agency that sits on 7 hills. And now verse 5 there it says, having a form of holiness, but denying the authority of it, from such turn away. Now this form of holiness, you got to remember what this agency that sits on 7 hills has pushed. It's the same thing that was pushed from the beginning. It's this mixture of righteousness and evil. Now this concerned the Apostle Shaul. Take a look at 2 Corinthians chapter 11 on page 907. This was of current concern to the Apostle Shaul. And here in verse 3, page 907. Guess I get the right page here. And here in verse 3 here, he shows here, he says, "But I fear that by any means, as the serpent subtly deceived Eve, with her craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted and led astray from the simplicity that is in Messiah." You know, the way to salvation is very simple. The way to protection is very simple. And as we're going to see, it boils down to simple obedience. That's all it boils down to, obedience to the one sent, obedience to the laws of Yahweh. And then you see the works in the world here, and it shows, "For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of the Messiah. And no marvel, for Satan herself is transformed," and that word transformed can mean disguised. They're disguised as into an angel of light. "Therefore it is no great thing if her ministers are also transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose ends will be according to their works." And as Yahshua put it quite simply, by their fruits you're going to know them. You're going to know the people by their fruits. Now, as the serpent subtly deceived Eve, Genesis chapter 3 on page 2. Genesis chapter 3 on page 2. In verse 1 shows, "Now the serpent was more subtle and crafty," showing the character, showing how she works, was more subtle and crafty than any beast of the field which Yahweh had made. "And he said to the woman, Has Yahweh indeed said that you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat of the fruit that is in the garden, but of the tree, but of the fruit which is of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Yahweh has said, You will not eat of it, you shall not eat it or touch it, or you will die. And the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die. For he knows that the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be as gods, knowing righteousness and evil." And I want to take a look at this, verse 5 here, this knowing righteousness and evil. Now, to know, when you know something, it actually means more than just to be well informed or have information about something. But according to Webster's dictionary, the word know means to perceive directly. It means to have an understanding of, and it also means to have the experience of. Okay, to have the experience of. Webster's thesaurus shows that this means to come to a knowledge of something by living through it, by actually living through it. And they give the example here of a gripping news story about orphans who have come to know full well the horrors of war. And a synonym to that is experience, or to suffer. So it's knowing righteousness and evil, actually experiencing this firsthand for themselves is what the serpent was telling Eve. Now, years ago, Pastor wrote that Satan deceived Eve. This is the reason Eve was deceived. Satan deceived Eve because of her rebellious attitude. She committed idolatry by allowing someone other than her head to teach her. She no longer desired to serve her head, and her desire turned to another who had rebelled against Yahweh. And this is the same thing that took place with the elders of Israel when the elders of Israel approached Samuel. There in 1 Samuel chapter 8, they rejected Yahweh. And the thing we have to remember, brothers and sisters, is that people become impatient, or they're looking for an excuse, some people, to leave the house of Yahweh and Yahweh. You can't leave the house of Yahweh and still serve Yahweh. It's impossible. You cannot do that. Do not be deceived. You cannot do that. And they get it in their mind that if such and such doesn't take place by this time or that time, if this doesn't take place, well, I'm out of here. You know, that attitude, brothers and sisters, is a proud, arrogant, presumptuous attitude that will get you burned. That is a promise of Yahweh. It will do that. We have to remember, brothers and sisters, never forget the prophecies. These prophecies will come to pass in Yahweh's own time. Yahweh's in complete control. He knows when these things are going to come to pass. Habakkuk says it. Habakkuk says that though it seems slow, the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak and it will not lie. Though it seems slow, wait for it because it will surely come. It will not delay. Think about this. How long did it take from the time of the prophecy of the destruction of the temple that would take place when it was prophesied? How long did it take for that to come to pass? How long did it take to come to pass for the reestablishment of the house of Yahweh in the last days to take place after the house of Yahweh was killed off by the emperor Pope Diocletian? How long did it take? Almost 1,900 years for that one to come to pass. How long do we have to wait for these things? Yeshua says it in Mattithyah 24:13. But he who endures until the end. He who endures until the end. Whatever that end is, whether it's Yeshua coming and reestablishing his government fully on this earth, or whether we're allowed to go to sleep and go to rest, it doesn't matter what that end is. We have to endure until that end. But the proof of the fulfillment of Yahweh's prophecies is all around us. We don't have far to look. All we have to do is look. Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28, there's a summary of the promises that come from either keeping the law or breaking the law. The blessings or the curses, the rewards or the consequences. And these in and of themselves are prophecies that are being fulfilled before our very eyes. What takes place when we eat pork? What takes place when we reject these laws of Yahweh? You know, when we eat pork, when we violate these laws, what takes place? These curses come upon us, and we can see the sickness and the disease all brought about through mankind's rebellion. That's what's brought it about. Isaiah 34:16 tells us to search out the book of Yahweh and read that not one of these will be neglected. Not a single prophecy will be neglected. Not a single promise is going to be neglected. Now, if you remember when Shaul was taken before Felix in Acts chapter 24, on page 867, when he was defending himself before Felix, what was his answer? You know, what were some of the things that he was saying here in Acts 24:13? Shaul's defense before Felix was in verse 13 here. He says, "Neither can they prove the things which they now accuse me of." You know, the accusations that were brought forth against our pastor and overseer, they couldn't prove anything because nothing had taken place. In verse 14 he says, "But I confess to you that after the way which they call heresy, so I worship the Father of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and the prophets." And this is our foundation. This is the stability, the foundation. These laws and prophecies are the stability of our times. These are the things we have to hang on to. These are the things we have to hang on to. If you remember Psalm 91, Psalm 91, that whole chapter, talks about those who dwell in a secret place. In the secret place, if you look at the side note there, it talks about the protected place. And it refers you directly to Micaiah 4:1, which is the prophecy concerning the reestablishment of the house of Yahweh in the last days. And then it shows there that they will abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Well, that shadow, when you look at that side note, what does that side note reference? That references protection. That's what it means. The shadow is equal to protection. In verse 4, it shows he will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will trust. His truth. What is the truth? Psalm 119, 142, and 151. Yahweh's laws are the truth. They will be your shield. They will be your buckler. Not this foolish protection that the world portrays that they have. Not these churches. These churches aren't going to do a thing for anybody. They can't. And the governments do not have any protection. They don't. And they're going to learn that lesson very, very soon. But it's Yahweh's laws, his truth. That is going to be the shield and buckler. That is where the protection comes in. In verse 10, we're told that no evil will befall you, and no plague will come near your dwelling, because you have set your love upon me. I will deliver you. I will cause you to escape and set you on high, because you know my name. Oh, people use the name of Yahweh. That's the protection. What does 1 Yochanan 2:4 say? He who says, I know him, but does not keep his law is a liar, and the truth is not in him. The only way we can abide by, be a part of this protection, is to abide by these laws. Isaiah 59, 1 and 2 shows us that it's us. We separate ourselves from Yahweh when we commit sin, when we practice sin, when we practice iniquity. That is what separates us from Yahweh. In Yeshua chapter 1, verse 5, Yahweh promises, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Yahweh keeps that promise. When we lose Yahweh's protection, it's not Yahweh turning from us, it's us turning from him. And that is example after example after example in the Holy Scriptures. Now, in Revelation chapter 3, on page 973, in Revelation chapter 3, on page 973, I want to take a look at verse 10 again. We looked at this the last time I spoke. We want to take a look at it again. Revelation chapter 3 and verse 10. It says, because you have kept the word of my patience, I will also keep you from the hour of temptation which will come upon the whole world to test those who dwell upon the earth. Look at the side notes over here to see what it means to keep the word. Because you have kept my word, kept the word of my patience. The word, side note I, says the every word of Yahweh. It says it's those who live by the every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh. Because you have kept the word of my patience. That word patience, look at side note J. Side note J. It says, Yahweh tries us by setting his laws in front of us to see if we will do what he has commanded or not. The same thing Yahweh did with the children of Israel when they were brought out of Egypt. Remember when he had allowed them to hunger and fed them with manna? That was the whole purpose of that, to see if they were going to be obedient or not. And because you have done this, because you have done these things, I will keep you from this hour, from the hour of temptation. You know, these perceived delays that people complain about sometimes, and it's all it is, it's a perceived delay because Yahweh's in complete control. Why don't we, instead of complaining about it, why don't we redeem the time and use that to get a little bit more sin out, to iron that garment, make that garment a little less wrinkly, get those spots out so that we can be fully prepared when Yahshua does come, and we are commanded to take our place, to stand in our place. But that word hour is number 5610 in Strong's, and it does mean time. Now, the temptation means to putting to proof. It means experience of evil. Okay, and it comes from 3985, which means discipline, and it means to prove, which comes from 3984, which comes through the idea of piercing, and also means to test. So, not only in this scripture here, in Revelation 3:10, not only are we promised the protection from the nuclear burning, but we're also promised the protection from the first-hand experience of sin. You know, we are promised protection from that. And remember what Satan tried to deceive Eve, what she successfully deceived Eve into doing. Oh, you need to experience this for yourself. Years ago, a pastor said, experience is not the best teacher. He says, experience is not the best teacher. Trusting in Yahweh and trusting and believing into the one sent. Now that is the best practice that we can have. But it's, you know, we're covered, you know, we experience this protection. And the key to all of this, the key to our protection and the key to our success is simple obedience. It's what Deuteronomy 28 shows. These things are coming upon the world simply because they did not obey Yahweh their Father. Okay? And for my last scripture, I would actually like to turn to Revelation chapter 21, because, you know, we are in these troublous times, and these times, you know, are going to get worse. Our time of testing is going to get more severe, as Pastor said. But as long as we are obedient to the one sent, we hang on, we hang on to the every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh, we have nothing to fear. Yahweh will see us through this. He promises us this, and this is what we have to look forward to. Revelation chapter 21, look at verse 1 here. It says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, Yachanan, saw a holy city, Yahweh Shammah, coming down from Yahweh out of heaven, prepared as brides adorned for their husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of Yahweh is with men, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and Yahweh himself will be with them and will be their father. It's not promised to anybody else. And Yahweh will wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there will be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, nor will there be any more pain, for the former things have passed away. He who sat upon the throne said, behold, I make all things new. And he said to me, write, for these things are true and faithful. Yahweh keeps his promises. He who overcomes will inherit all things. I will be his father, and they will be my sons and my daughters. With that, brothers and sisters, may Yahweh be with you and bless you. May Yahweh bless your understanding, if everyone will stand. I'll turn it over to the Great Kohan, Eliah Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. Of course, in our world today, we have this everlasting, the gods trying to tell you how they can keep you alive. They can heal you from the things that you go through. And, of course, the things that you suffer, this little pill will make it better. Well, doctors are bragging and calling it a medical breakthrough where they were able to take a woman who was dying. Her lungs had been severely infected. She was needing a lung transplant. So they removed her lungs for 6 days, and they were able to keep her alive until they could get a dead person's lungs and put in her. Now, that's supposed to be a medical breakthrough. A medical breakthrough would have been to heal the woman and let her come up and live a normal life. That would have been a medical breakthrough. But, of course, this is what the hope they're putting into the mind of people that run to these hospitals, hoping that the hospital can take and fix their sin that they're not willing to repent of. And that's the important thing to remember, that if there was a treatment of repentance, that could be dealt with. But this willingness to sin and want someone to fix it, that is what can be dealt with. You can't help someone and you can't heal someone that doesn't want to repent. And then, of course, in New Jersey, the New Jersey hospital that is reported by RT, they were actually contaminating people with lead. They had lead in their water. And, of course, it's kind of humorous. One of the doctors says that a little bit of lead won't hurt anyone. Now, a little bit of poison won't hurt anyone. I wonder if he was drinking it. That's one of the questions. And, of course, then he says, well, what you need to do is avoid the source. Well, the source was the hospital, so stay away from that hospital in New Jersey. And then Big Pharma. Remember, it talks about the sorceries and revelations, the money they make from it. There was a drug that was put out on the market, and, of course, the article will explain what this drug is. And it was set up for test trials, and they had to stop the test trials due to the people they were testing were dying at alarming rates from heart attacks and strokes. Now, did they stop it? No, it went on the market. And it literally says they bribed other companies to keep their mouth shut and to stay away. Well, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, they learned of this. They were made aware of it. Now, did they pull it off the market? No, they said you just need to tell these people if you take it as directed, you will most likely die of a heart attack or a stroke. Now, that's the ones that are supposed to protect you and keep you safe out in this world, and, of course, they're not doing their jobs. And then, of course, the Trident missile system, that is a nuclear missile system in the UK. They actually were reporting on how a launch actually failed. It did not work as it's supposed to, and, of course, they're trying to refund this dilapidated system. It's old. It needs to be rebuilt up. But watch Theresa May as she answers the questions of the reporter who's asking her, and imagine the frustration of getting everything but an answer that this man is going through. And, of course, this last week, Pope Francis compares Donald Trump to Hitler. Compares him to Hitler, but he says he will give him a little bit of time before he passes judgment on him to see which way he's going to go. And then, of course, President Donald Trump also actually this last week threatening to send federal agents, put martial law into effect in the city of Chicago due to the alarming rate of murders. They've already had 228 shootings. That was in the first 26 days of this year, and 42 homicides. And also watch later next month, President Trump has also invited Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House. Now, of course, they will be discussing things concerning that two-state solution. That will be the main topic, I'm sure. And then, of course, Donald Trump also is moving forward. President Donald Trump is moving forward with the building of the border wall. Now, keep in mind, he has said, of course, Mexico will pay for this. And Mexico has said, no, we will not pay for this. So keep in mind, who in the end do you think will pay for this? You got it. Everything you buy that comes from Mexico will go up at least 20% of whatever that wall costs, and that's how they're going to do it. In the end, the people buying the products will pay for that wall if they do so put a wall up. Mexico or United States won't pay for it as a government. It's the people that will bear the burden, so to speak, of these things. And then President Trump also signed an executive order this week. He signed an amazing amount of bills. You can see what Daniel was speaking about with all of these laws signed into effect. But he actually said that heavy vetting, not allowing certain countries to enter the United States through an executive order for the next 30 days would be put into effect. Now, it's very interesting because if you remember, General Wesley Clark said years ago, and we showed it in the sanctuary before, and we'll show it again to bring it back to remembrance, where it said that Donald Rumsfeld had said that we're going to go to war with 7 countries in 5 years. And, of course, those countries were Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Lebanon. Well, it's very coincidental, I'm sure, that the 7 countries that have been placed in executive order that they're not allowed into the country are Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Iraq, Iran, and Yemen. So Lebanon was the only one that changed, but it's very interesting that those countries fall into that category. And then Hamas. Now remember, Hamas is the leading rulership party in Palestine. That's the other branch. It's on that 2-state agreement between Palestine and Israel. They have said that they are to release a new political document stating their new political views soon. They didn't say how soon, but they said they would be releasing it soon. And then back to President Trump concerning the EPA, that's the Environmental Protection Agency, also the ones that deal with the climate change. He has put a media blackout on them so they cannot tweet, they cannot put out press releases, anything until he can get his appointee, the one who he wants to oversee the EPA, which is actually the Attorney General from Oklahoma. He wants him into office because they want to pull off everything about the climate change. They want that pulled down, and of course, President Trump has said that it is a hoax. That's what he has said. And then it goes into a movie. This is something, it's only the movie trailer. I hadn't heard of it till last night. But there's a movie that didn't make mainstream media. It was only released to YouTube, but it is a Hollywood-looking movie. The production level was very high. And the movie is called The Thinning. The Thinning. And it's talking about depopulation, cutting down on the population. Now, 2 interesting things with this movie. One, it was released on October 12th, 2016, which is 10/12/16. If you look up those numbers, 10 means a perishing or something lost, 12 means slaughter or destruction, and word number 16 comes from word number 14, and it means to be willing. So to be willing to be part of this slaughter or a perishing, well, it talks about depopulating, and the way they determine who's going to be depopulated, it'll show in the movie trailer, but it actually takes people and they test them. In schools, you would think of final exams and so forth. Those who score the lowest 5% are immediately exterminated, literally removed from the classroom and taken to be exterminated. But you have to be knowledgeable of the system to stay alive. If you're not knowledgeable of the system, you wouldn't stay alive. And from what we've seen with some schools of higher learning, that would probably be the lowest 5% because they don't really have that knowledge. But when you think about it, it's all about keeping people in a control and educating them in a certain way to where if you don't get it, you die. And that's it. And then, of course, the doomsday clock this week was moved up closer to 2 minutes and 30 seconds till midnight. And, of course, they're saying this is due to the talk of war and also climate control and the lack thereof, lack of participants, where it looks like President Donald Trump is not wanting to be part of this. And then Mikhail Gorbachev, of course, he was the president when the Soviet Union, he was president during Ronald Reagan's term and also in the United States. And, of course, they had many deals concerning the nuclear treaties. But he says that it looks like the world is preparing for war. And that's a quote from him. The world is preparing for war. And, of course, they mentioned that the last time the clock was this close was in 1953. In 1953. Remember that number, and there'll be some things after the news. If we can please go ahead and play the news.
Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, living for 6 days without lungs, building walls of division, and how close are we to doomsday? Well, today's news will go a little more in detail on these topics and many more. But first, it's being called a medical world's first. A woman on a list for a double lung transplant lived for 6 days without her lungs inside her body while she waited for the transplant. Chief Surgeon Dr. Saf Khashoggi, one of the 13 doctors, explained to RT why such drastic measures were taken in this case. He said with blood pressure supporting drugs, antibiotics, with the extra corporeal lung support pump, we couldn't even keep her blood pressure up, and it was quite clear she was going to die that day.
He continued, after thinking carefully and having encountered this before, we realized that the only option was to remove the source of the infection. In her case, both lungs.
Interesting. Well, when you're sick, most people go to the hospital. But what if your hospital had dangerous contaminants in the drinking water? And that's exactly what was found in a New Jersey hospital where high levels of lead were found in the drinking water. The Englewood Hospital has switched to bottled water and tank water in 8 of its facilities as a result. And this was prompted after the State Department of Environmental Protection released a report. Now, the hospital released a statement on the matter as follows.
Out of an abundance of caution, we are providing bottled and or tank water throughout our medical center, including on all units for patients and employee use in the kitchen for all meal preparation. We have placed notices about this issue throughout the campus. Now, on December 21st, water samples from some of its buildings detected lead levels that exceeded the federal limit.
After the hospital received a notice from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, or the NJDEP, they issued a statement saying, "We take this issue very seriously and are working in cooperation with the NJDEP to determine the source of the lead and remedy the issue."
The notice continued, "Our patients' health and safety is our primary concern. We are being vigilant in our efforts to maintain a safe and healthy environment for our patients, visitors, and staff, and all those who come to our facility."
Well, Dr. Bruce Ruck, the managing director of the New Jersey Poison Center at Rutgers University, said that it was highly unlikely that anyone exposed to lead at the facility is in any real dangerous risk because it was for such a short amount of time, and those who would have been exposed would not have ingested any significant amount of lead. In general, the amount of water that someone would drink at a hospital being very small, he's saying, it's very unlikely to have high levels of lead in their system.
And Katan, that doctor concluded by saying that although no level of lead is good, the key is to separate the individual from the source.
Yeah, makes sense. Jurors from around the country are going to begin hearing cases against drug maker AbbVie about the dangers associated with their testosterone therapy treatments. According to court documents, Androgel, a testosterone product made by the company, has been linked to a big increase in heart attacks and strokes in men who use that product. The company is accused of deceptive marketing practices along with hiding the facts concerning the dangers surrounding Androgel's use.
Some of those marketing practices included trying to sell to people who absolutely didn't need it. The FTC is also accusing the company of payoffs to competitors to keep competition low. Now, regarding the company's awareness of the danger of the product's use, one report gave some startling evidence.
That's right. The report stated a recent randomized clinical trial of testosterone therapy in men with a high prevalence of cardiovascular diseases was stopped prematurely due to adverse cardiovascular events, raising concerns about testosterone therapy safety. Well, in effect, Jeff Tessing told the company that the product was so dangerous that clinical studies had to be stopped, yet this product still made it to public use. Well,
the FDA even got involved, stating on their website of the dangers of testosterone products even when used as directed. Now, initially, drug companies designed the testosterone drugs for older men with low levels of testosterone. But that's only a small percentage of the market, not enough to make the billions of dollars in profits. So they went after men of all ages, marketing to them that any problem that they had could be resolved with testosterone therapy.
So it seems like it was more money-driven than
Sure does.
something that was beneficial for the health and safety of their patients. Well, as a result, sales topped $1 billion, but according to a lawsuit filed by FTC against AbbVie, the company began bribing competitors to keep their products off the market, which is a tactic that the FTC calls pay-to-delay scams.
Well, UK's Prime Minister Theresa May is being tight-lipped about a Trident missile failed test firing ahead of a parliamentary vote on whether or not to renew Britain's nuclear deterrent. Now, in an interview with the BBC, she was asked if she knew of the test. There was not a yes or no answer given.
Well, Trident is the UK's missile defense system based in Scotland and is comprised of 4 nuclear-armed submarines which are approaching the end of their working lives and are due for decommission in the next 10 years. Well, last year the UK voted to renew the Trident program, which is an age system, with a cost of up to 100 million or billion, euros. As the vote came near, May stressed the reliability of the Trident and said that there were basically no alternatives.
Well, Pope Francis has warned against growing populism in Europe. Now, these warnings come as a wave of populism, which is the support or concern of ordinary people, comes over Europe. Now, he also said that voters angry with traditional political elite have thrown their weight behind nationalist, anti-immigrant leaders. Now, he also said in times of crisis, we lack judgments, and that is a constant reference for me. He concluded, Hitler didn't steal the power, the people voted for him, and he destroyed the people.
Wow, interesting. Well, back to the Windy City, Chicago, where this year's number of shootings have already topped last year's, up to 228 from 2016's number of 216. 42 of those were homicides in 2017, compared with 32 a year ago. Well, President Trump said something has to be done about it or he will have to intervene. He tweeted, if Chicago doesn't fix the horrible carnage going on, 228 shootings in 2017 with 42 murders, up 24% from 2016, he said, I will send in the feds.
Well, President Trump's comments came a day after Chicago's Mayor Rahm Emanuel criticized Trump's priorities, saying, you didn't get elected to debate the crowd size of your inaugural. Now, that he had people wondering if the mayor's comments had solicited the president's tweet or if he'd been considering executive action, even martial law.
Yes, we'll see. Well, Pat Dowell, a city council member in Chicago, said, I think he's talking about federal troops. We don't really need that in Chicago. What we need is federal funds for education, redevelopment, and job training. If he's talking about federal investment in Chicago in terms of money, we're all for that. More jobs, not jails.
Well, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said the president was talking about more than money, saying there's other aid that can be extended as well through the U.S. Attorney's Office or other means to ensure that the people of Chicago have the resources to feel safe. As for now, the feds are already in Chicago assisting law enforcement, but they'd welcome more.
Spicer also said that the president would like to start a dialogue with the city. He also added that, I think what the president is upset about is turning on the television and watching Americans get killed by shootings.
Well, in other news related to the president, Prime Minister Netanyahu received an invite to Washington, D.C. next month. YPN's Larry McGee is following the story for us, as well as the latest concerning the president's controversial proposal concerning the wall. Larry, what is the latest?
After months of U.S.-Israeli tensions, the new president is extending the peace pipe to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with an invitation to the nation's capital for a sit-down. The two are purposed to work closely on several key issues, including the hot-button topic of Iran. President Trump has been publicly vocal concerning his unwavering support for and commitment to the security and safety of Israel, in hopes of easing hostilities following the U.S.'s failure to veto a UN resolution against Israeli settlements. The matter has still not been settled, however, between the new president and the nation's southern neighbor, and President Trump is now reported to be making efforts to deliver on his campaign promise of constructing a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. The president is maneuvering to accomplish the action through the power of executive orders, and the endeavor so far has been met with the expected degree of public outrage and protest. Despite the president's campaign claims, however, there was initially widespread skepticism regarding the practicality and feasibleness of the idea, but that is now apparently all dissolved amid the determination of the president's current push. The administration is also taking executive action to boost the U.S.'s deportation forces and has proposed to fund construction with taxpayer dollars to be later recouped in some form from the Mexican government. Commentators are taking note of how swift the president has been to deliver on his promises. On his first day, he nullified the Trans-Pacific Partnership Treaty. On day 2, he canceled construction on the Keystone XL pipelines and restored access to the Dakota people. And on day 3, the president ordered mobilization on the southern wall. The newly installed head says he has nothing against the people of Mexico, but a nation without borders is simply not a nation. The Mexican proposal is merely one element of the president's broader goal of immigration reform, however, which is also believed to include forthcoming action preventing immigration into the states by Syrian refugees. In commenting on that last detail in prior interviews, President Trump has stated that the U.S. has enough problems without allowing people to come in who in many cases or in some cases are looking to do tremendous damage. The president has acknowledged an intention to exclude certain nations outright, and for others, the controversial leader has said there will be extreme vetting. This is all due to be a part of a plan that is reported to include suspending the refugee admissions program for 120 days, an indefinite blockade on Syrian refugees, and instituting an overall cap on refugees to be admitted into the country in 2017 to 50,000. Moreover, the leader has proposed a ban on 7 key nations in the Euphrates region. The list includes Syria, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Iran, Yemen, and Iraq. Analysts are quick to note that General Wesley Clark had earlier identified the same list of nations, with the exception of Yemen, as U.S. targets some time ago in a plan designed to use force to conquer 7 nations in 5 years.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes 7 countries in 5 years. 7 countries in 5 years.
For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Good time, Jeff. Back to you.
Well, quite interesting. And I remember bringing that out about Wesley Clark several times in several of our previous episodes. Doesn't look like anything is really building towards peace with those initiatives on the table. Well, rival Palestinian group Hamas and Fatah announced the creation of a new unity government in mid-January and are now working on writing a new document displaying the unified government positions and goals. Osama Hamdan, a senior leader and spokesperson for Hamas, was recently interviewed on Al Jazeera's Up Front. The British journalist questioned him about the language of the current charter and blames Israel, for all the world's problems, including communism and instigating World War I and World War II.
Well, when asked why not just take the anti-Semitic language out of the charter to show Hamas is truly not anti-Semitic, Hamdan responded, when we are talking about the Jews, we are not against their religion. We are not against their beliefs. We are not against them as a people who believes. In fact, we believe in Moses. We believe he was a prophet like Muhammad. And we believe they are the same. So we are against the one who is occupying our lands. We are against the one who is occupying our cities, villages.
Yeah, and that's been a big sore spot with them.
Absolutely.
And the territories the settlements that Israel is continuing to build in. He continued, we have said clearly we'll have a clear political document which is supposed to be in the near future, clarifying all those points. And you'll find in all those documents a clear words that are, we are against Zionists, against occupations of our lands, and we will resist occupiers, whoever they are, and we are not against anyone regarding to his religion or his race.
Now, he was vague, however, on when this document would be coming out or what exactly it would consist of, only to say very soon and to ask him after the document is declared. Well, when further pressed to say if Hamas now supports a two-state solution, so that was the question, does Hamas now support the two-state solution that everybody's talking about? Hamdan made it clear he was not authorized to answer such a question. Kind of said, wait and see, wait for the document to come out.
That's right. Well, the new U.S. administration is also working on changes in their government. The Environmental Protection Agency, in particular, is feeling the squeeze. Trump's officials are temporarily silencing the EPA to get them on the same page with the president's public statements.
This is causing concerns around the country, including Trump's alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania, which is home to PPEH, or Penn Program in Environmental Humanities. Now, environmentalists like PPEH's founding director, Professor Bethany Wiggin, focused on Trump's climate change rhetoric throughout the campaign.
Words from Trump like, all of this with the global warming, a lot of it's a hoax, are why Wiggin, her colleagues, and her students are now racing to back up any information they can get from the government websites to other servers. Now, as of Tuesday, January 24th, the Trump administration has ordered a social media blackout for all EPA employees. The government says it is temporary, but people's fear that access to data will be limited and as environmental protections are changed.
Professor Wiggins said, I'm really worried that the facts might become more difficult to access. So there's kind of a vulnerability of internet materials already. They become more vulnerable still when controlled by an administration who finds them inconvenient. So they're trying to get as much information while it's still up there before it's gone.
Interesting. Well, to show their disagreement with the administration's decision, Badlands National Park put out some tweets about climate change and then later deleted them. Trump's own nominee for head of Environmental Protection Agency, Scott Pruitt, also clearly disagreed with Trump's position during his hearing, telling senators that he did not believe global warming was a hoax.
But just last May, Pruitt wrote, scientists continue to disagree about the degree and extent of global warming and its connection to the actions of mankind. The debate, he said, should be encouraged.
Well, Rachel Cletus of the Union of Concerned Scientists thinks Pruitt's words at the hearing are, quote, a dangerous new form of climate denial, the sort of climate denial that says it's real, but we don't know what's causing it. And basically, it's yet another way to kick the can down the road and not take any action. She says the safety of the Earth's climate will suffer for the sake of economic growth.
Another development that deserves a mention in Catan, the CDC abruptly canceled its long-planned climate and health summit just days before Trump's inauguration. Now, the conference was going to inform health officials from around the country on the growing evidence on climate change affecting public health.
So what does the president say about all this? Well, after meeting with auto executives the other day, he commented, "I am to a large extent an environmentalist. I believe in it." Kind of confusing.
Well, we've reported in the past how Vatican spokesmen have said the Earth needs to be depopulated by about 6 billion people. Of course, this information is not widely known by the general public. However, there are those who are hinting at the fact that the Earth needs to be thinned out. Well, take a look at this movie trailer for The Thinning and see for yourself.
How many sides does the Pentagon have?
5.
What causes disease? Take your time. Focus on the equation. You're going to do great.
I love you.
I love you so much.
What if only the smartest boys and girls got to live here?
You'll have 2 hours to complete the test. All grades are final. Here are the results. No.
Okay, let's go. Lena Michaels. What?
Ellie Harper.
There are those that say the thinning is barbaric. Is it barbaric to be the best? If you don't support our great society, then you are a parasite. What we do with parasites? We wash them out!
Are we approved to commence the thinning?
You are approved.
Definitely an interesting take on the depopulation ideology. Well, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists made an unprecedented announcement of their own this past week in an event of Trump's presidency, overturning many U.S. offices and the wider geopolitical turbulence the world has been facing. The doomsday clock was moved 30 seconds forward to 2.5 minutes before midnight.
Rachel Bronson from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists gave the reasons concisely as to what would cause such a drastic move. In a statement, she said, "The first has been a cavalier and reckless language used across the globe, especially in the United States during the presidential election and after, around nuclear weapons and nuclear threats."
And the second, she continued, is growing disregard of scientific expertise that is needed when it comes to responding to pressing global challenges, including climate change. Well, the board concluded in no uncertain terms that words matter in ensuring the safety and security of our planet. They are not the same as actions, but they matter a lot, especially when the risk of accidents and miscalculations are so high. She added that influential actors change their behavior in response to leaders' words, which, quote, do not promote confidence and steady or smart decision making.
Well, Mikhail Gorbachev is one leader who consistently promoted a world with less nuclear weapons. The former head of the USSR wrote in an opinion piece for Time magazine during the first week of Trump's presidency, his purpose, he writes, is it all looks as if the world is preparing for war. That was his statement there. He said, once again, it all looks as if the world is preparing for war. Now, the Nobel Peace Prize winner said of his post, politicians and military leaders sound increasingly belligerent and defense doctrines more dangerous. Commentators and TV personalities are joining the bellicose chorus.
Recently, President Trump tweeted, "The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes. Gorbachev, who oversaw an agreement with the U.S. to reduce nuclear arsenal, now watches as Trump possibly begins the reversal of decades of American policy concerning nuclear arms.
Well, there's no sign the new U.S. president is going to back down. On MSNBC's Morning Joe in December, he said, "Let it be an arms race." Well, only one other time, Katan, has the doomsday clock been moved this close to total annihilation, which is midnight, and that was the year 1953. And if you remember, that was when the U.S. and the Soviet Union tested their first hydrogen bombs.
Interesting.
Well, 2.5 minutes is not a long time, but it's long enough for you to get to your phone or computer and contact the House of Yahweh.
When you contact the House of Yahweh, don't forget to request your free copies of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can also call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. You can also email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all other calls, please dial the number on your screen. And of course, don't forget the Yisrael Says program, which aids you in the study of your Holy Scriptures. You can find that by going to www.yisraelsays.com.
Well, keep that number 1953 in mind, because up next is Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.
You may all be seated. Now, looking at the number 1953, it's important to notice in 1953, the Hebrew word for that means whom he hears. Whom he hears. It comes from two words. It comes from word 3006 or 3068, which is the word Yahweh. So Yahweh, who hears, is word 8085. So 1953, the Hebrew word 1953, literally comes from Yahweh who hears. Now, keep that in mind as turn over very quickly to Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 49. Isaiah chapter 49. And of course in verse 8 it says, "This is what Yahweh says." Now remember, he's speaking about Yisrael, the one who was protected, the one who was guarded. And of course from the bowels of his mother, he had made mention of his name. This is who he's talking about. And remember what Pastor has told us, and we will read it again in Isaiah, that every time Pastor is mentioned, him and his seed, him and those who follow the teachings of the chosen branch. So this is what Yahweh says, "In an acceptable time I have heard you, and in the day of salvation I have helped you. I will protect you and give you as a covenant to the people to restore the earth," to bring this earth back to what it's supposed to be, what it was intentionally created for, to cause to inherit the desolate heritages. Now, of course, this is what Yahweh's saying. This is the one whom he recognizes. And if you remember the stones of acquittal, the white stone, and it had 3 numbers on it. And if you remember, those numbers were 17, 28, and 74. 17, 28, and 74. And just for your notes, if you need something for a reference, you can find that in the 12th book of Israel, part 1, in verse 59. That's where Pastor talks about he saw this white stone and it had 3 numbers on it. Now, something very important to keep in mind, turn over to Psalms 91, because there's a picture that we want to show you. A picture, but we want to kind of understand what Yahweh's showing us. What Yahweh's showing us. And I'll show you the picture quickly so you can kind of have it in your mind. And of course, what you see is a city, and it's flooded. And of course, you have a helicopter right here. That's a Navy helicopter, U.S. Navy helicopter. And it's over this city that is flooded. And of course, this article is entitled, Trump Will Kill the Paris Climate Change Deal. Now, a little bit about this article before we go to Psalms 91. It says, Donald Trump has said that he will back out of the United States promise under the Paris Climate Change Agreement, which was enacted just 5 days ago. That's 5 days ago from the date of this article. If Trump wants to undermine international cooperation on climate change, he can do it legally and effectively, despite provisions that locks the U.S. in the deal for at least 4 years. It says, according to the provisions of the agreement itself, the United States cannot remove itself from the deal for 3 years, after which it would still be committed for an additional year. There's another option, and it's far more aggressive. Trump could withdraw from the 1992 UN Framework Convention on Climate Change with just 1 year's notice. So it is possible for the United States to pull out of this deal with just 1 year's notice. And of course, in Psalms 91, this should be a very familiar scripture to us that we should all literally seek refuge in, as it says. And in verse 1, it says, he who dwells in the secret place, of course, we're speaking of Abel, of the Most High will abide under the shadow of the Almighty, or will walk in his way. We say to Yahweh, you are our refuge and our fortress. You are our Father, in you will we trust. And of course, verse 3, surely he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his feathers, under his wings you trust. Of course, that is his talit, and his truth will be your shield and buckler. And of course, we know that Yahweh's law is the truth. 613 laws. And keep in mind, this is something that should never leave our mind. Even in the very elementary parts of the peaceful solution, you are taught that the keeping of rules keeps you safe. Rules keep you safe. When you break the rules, you lose safety. Keep that in mind. These rules keep us safe. And of course, you're kept safe here at this house of protection where these rules are taught. Praise Yahweh. Now, notice verse 5. It says, you will not be afraid of the terror of night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 will fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but notice, it will not come near you. Only with your eyes you will look and will see the reward of the wicked. Now, of course, that's what we do with the news every Sabbath. We see with our eyes without having to endure these things. It says, because you have made, that means you have to choose, because you have made Yahweh your refuge, because you have made the Most High your house, the house of Yahweh, no evil will befall you, nor will any plagues come near your dwelling. Now, that's if you choose to keep these rules of safety, these laws that keep us safe. And in verse 11 it says, for he will give his Malachim charge concerning you to protect you in all your ways. And remember Revelations 22, where Yeshua says, I have sent my Malach to testify of these things. So to remember, to get these rules in our mind, we have to do that through either the seeing or the hearing of these rules, the preaching and the publishing of these rules. And of course, they keep us safe. And it's important that we understand it's not a magical thing to be here and nothing touches you. It's the actual choice and the putting to work the teachings that cause us to fall in the shadow of the Most High, to become Yahweh, be like Yahweh, just as our teacher is doing, and walk in that way. That is where our safety and our refuge comes from. And of course, for us, it starts with our teacher, Yisrael Hawkins, who is like Yahweh. And look over to Proverbs chapter 3 on page 498. Proverbs chapter 3 on page 498 and verse 18. And remember, we're told to honor our mother and our father, that our days may be long upon the earth. And of course, we realize that is talking about our physical mothers and fathers. We're not to dishonor them, but we're also to honor Yahweh, who is our father, and of course the house of Yahweh, who is our mother, spiritual mother. And in verse 18 of chapter 3 of Proverbs, it says, she is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Now, of course, this house of Yahweh is the tree of life. It's the tree that was from the beginning with Adam and Eve in the midst of the garden. It was the house of Yahweh that was this tree of life. Blessed are those who hold fast to her. Notice it's not those who find and go there and leave. It's blessed are those who hold fast. In other words, you have to grab a hold of it like we used to say, like a bulldog. Don't let go. Hold on to everything that it has. And you may be thinking, what does this have to do with an article about Donald Trump and a climate agreement? It's not a secret that the climate agreement is a depopulation agreement. That was made clear when it was put into effect. The Vatican even pulled in the lead scientist that was over depopulation. We've showed that in the sanctuary before. Even someone with President Trump's mentality, when you have a major corporation and it starts to fail, you have to go through a restructuring process. What is the first thing you do when you restructure a major corporation? That's right, you fire them. You have to downsize. You have to lower your expenditures to maximize your profits. Think about that. Keep that in mind. And then think about, of course, Isaiah. Turn over to Isaiah chapter 59. Isaiah chapter 59. Because those who hold fast to the teachings that come forth from the one sent, the chosen branch, that's where it starts on this earth. It starts with the chosen branch, and of course it proceeds from there. And remember the stone of acquittal that was given to pastor. The stone of acquittal that was given to pastor. And don't forget that those who fall underneath him fall with him. You are tied with him. Where you see Israel, where you see the witness, you fall in that category. And in verse 21 of chapter 59 of Isaiah, it says, "As for me, this is my covenant with them, says Yahweh, my spirit which is upon you, namely my laws which I have put in your mouths." Well, how can you have the laws of Yahweh put in your mouth? It's through the teachings of the words that come from the mouth of Yisrael Hawkins, right? They come through his mouth into our ears, and then they can leave from our mouths. Otherwise, we don't even know how to teach them. Well, my laws I have put in your mouth, they will not depart from your mouth, nor from the mouth of your seed, nor from the mouth of your seed, says Yahweh. So those who grab a hold of this tree of life and they do not forsake it, they will hold fast to this teaching, to these laws. And then look over to Isaiah 44. Isaiah 44 and verse 8. "And remembering that those who hold fast to this house, they are counted as Yisrael Hawkins. They fall into the promise of the witness." And in 44 verse 8 we see, this is Yahweh telling us. This is what the instructions he's giving to Yisrael and his seed. "Do not fear, nor be afraid. Have I not told you from that time, and have declared, you are my witnesses," speaking to the two witnesses and their seeds, those who bind themselves to the chosen branch. "Is there another source of power except me? And truly, there is no other rock, I know not one." So we know this depopulation is coming. We know that it's coming through this climate agreement. Look over to Isaiah 43. Isaiah 43, verses 1 through 2. "But now this is what Yahweh says, who created you, O Jacob, who formed you, O Israel. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they will not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, nor will the flame kindle upon you." When you walk through the fire, you have to literally look at, if you leave the house of Yahweh, once you go outside the gates where there will be a nuclear burning, you can pretty much equivalent that to burning in hell, because you've left this place of protection. That is the hell that will burn, and it will consume, as Isaiah 24:6 shows. But if you tie yourself to this branch, to this chosen branch, once again, let's go back to this picture on climate change. You see this helicopter right here? There's two things to notice. Of course, I want you to notice the date first. The date right here. Zoom it in very slowly. Not by choice. Can everyone see the date is November 9th? Can you see that? November 9th. If you can't, we'll show it. It won't zoom any closer than that, but it's November 9th. Well, very quickly, we'll go through some math. Very quickly. Remember the numbers that Pastor Stone of Acquittal is? 17, 28, and 74. Well, if you add those together, you have 11/9, or 119, or November 9th. Now, of course, Yahweh says that those who tether themselves to this choicest branch will fall underneath the same thing that Yisrael Hawkins falls underneath. You will be part of this acquittal. You will be delivered because you walk in the shadow of the Almighty, as Psalm says. And remember what we started with by saying the peaceful solution teaches, as does the house of Yahweh, that rules keep us safe. Rules keep us safe. Now, what are the odds? You see this helicopter right here once again? This is a Navy helicopter, and of course you can't see it in this picture, but I'll show you another one. They're all identified with numbers. All helicopters, they have a number that identifies them, just like a car would have a tag. Well, there's the number on this one, and I'll show it to you a little closer. That's the number on the helicopter. Now, keep this in mind. These rules keep us safe. If you tether yourself to the chosen branch, you will be delivered. Only the wicked will fall. And if you notice, this helicopter once again, do you notice how it's seeing the destruction that's taking place, but it's not coming upon that particular thing? Look at it as these laws, you will see it, 10,000 to one side, 1,000 to the other, but it will not befall you because you fall underneath the shadow of protection by tethering yourself to the choicest branch and the teachings that come forth from this great house. At this time, if everyone will please stand, I would like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the Great Kohan Yisrael, Abel Hawkins.
Shalom! Wow! We got a great crowd here, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh! You may be seated. There shouldn't be any doubts in anyone's mind now. Boy, with news like that falling right into place with the prophecies, it's always amazes me when I see it, but it's there and it's real. We're in that time period right now. Praise Yahweh. The Vatican is active too. Now, when you saw this news, I hope you remembered that we're supposed to have peace. The Pope was involved in it, and they called Abbas an angel of peace. Peace, lasting peace, true peace. Of course, that's what Thessalonians says also, that they'd call it. And then the Pope and Abbas walking hand in hand there. Full text of Paris Peace Conference, closing declaration over 70 countries. Didn't amount to anything. They just go right on fighting. Where's the peace? Where's the peace? It's not in Israel. In fact, Netanyahu's army says they're going to go full force. There is a way to peace, and we're bringing it out loud and clear. Many are seeking Bible renditions for answers. I've seen that word used. I started using it a few years ago instead of version because a rendition it's more or less a replacement. It's not really a translation. It's they render it what they believe it should be, and of course they want to support their own religions in doing so. So they render it wrong. But this is a news article that we put out this week, and let me see if I got the right one. Yeah, here it is. This is, many are seeking Bible renditions for answers, but Yisrael Hawkins says there is only one true source of knowledge. That is really going well. If I could get up to date on it right now, this was early this morning, but it was up to 69,000 news medias running that article this morning. That's kind of a record breaker, and it's going up rapidly. The Yisrael Hawkins refutes accusations and proclaims message of peace in new posts this week is up to 190,000, which is still climbing, by the way. The peace that we're supposed to have, of course, they're announcing it. This we have a Ask Israel program. Now, this is on Google. This is a different program than Yisrael Says, but you can type in any question, and Google has taken all of our books and put them in, and you can ask it any question and ask Google and ask this program any question. You can do that with your telephone or your computer at home. The House of Yahweh has added one more study aid to your toolkit. In addition to the Yisrael Says program, there is now Ask Yisrael, all one word, .com. This new search tool is powered by Google and allows you to search through the books, booklets, blog posts, PWs, newsletters, and more. Just go to AskYisrael.com and begin your search in a few seconds. At the same time that is going forth, we got the doomsday clock. I don't know if we had an article on that, but they moved it forward by another 30 seconds, so we're getting closer to this world war. Israel says Army will go full force in future wars. Collapsing EU shouldn't lecture Israel defense chief. It's hatred and war every which direction you look. Systematic unlawful killings. European group slams Israel for Gaza deaths. And 613 helicopter. Don't forget that. That was, I thought, was magnificent. And the sermon this morning by the great Deacon Abba Shalom, it fits right in. Everything fits right into what I want to bring you. This article, we're taking names of those who fail to support U.S. Trump's new UN envoy warns. They're threatening the nations. For those that don't have our back or backing, we're taking names. We will make points to respond to that accordingly. Haley warned on Friday. Yeah, from 69,000 up to 74. It's actually 73,985. So you can see how fast that news article is climbing that we put in the paper yesterday. Yesterday evening, I believe it was. Threatening the nations. Those that don't back the United States are under threat. And, of course, the doomsday clock moves 30 seconds closer to the nuclear war and the doomsday. The Trump orders military to prepare for world war, orders them to get ready, orders the funds to also be available to get ready quickly to bring this about. The Israeli defense minister, next war will be fought until enemy raises white flag or until the earth is burned. Read Revelations 18. You're going to see that's going to last 1 hour, by the way. Pakistan and India enter a war of nuclear missile tests. China announces deployment of new long-range nuclear missile. That's a big one. And, of course, the things it would carry, I forgot, I think it's 14 nuclear bombs or something like that. Surely you can tell they're not getting ready for peace. Peace, true peace. Those are words, but they're beautiful words, but they're not doing anything to really bring this about. Well, what I want you to understand, what I was trying to last week, and the sermon by Abba Shalom just fit right in there, and all the news fit right in. This is great what Kohan Parayah Holler Hawkins brought with the after the news and the numbers there. We're in this time period. We're in the time period that Yahweh showed Daniel that we would be in at this time. And of course, the last part of the Oslo Accord, I've written many articles on that showing the selfishness that is actually in that Oslo Accord, and it will not bring peace. In fact, this will be the start that leads up to, if you've read Caspar Weinberger's book, the next war. These are events that actually they can actually see that they will lead up to the use of the nuclear bombs. But the prophesied work that we're in, be turning to Isaiah 43, the prophesied work of Yahweh. Yahweh has put together a house. In the last days I will establish my house, and remember those words, last days. The end is used as the same description describing this time period that we're in, which is the last part of the 7 years, the 7-year peace plan that was confirmed with Rabin in Daniel 9. And of course, the last part of that was Yahweh showed would be shut down in the midst, which it was. It was confirmed by Clinton, Arafat, and of course many. That word Rabin, that's what it means, many. He will confirm with many, the King James Version said, but the actual Hebrew word there was Rabin. And Rabin was actually the one it was confirmed with. Then Yahweh showed it would be in action for 3.5 years, then be shut down, meaning 3.5 years would be left. And that last 3.5 years, you got to remember, it's going to be cut short, really short, because otherwise Yahweh could not save his own house. So he is the one that's going to cut it short to keep all flesh from being destroyed, as the Savior said in Mattithyah 24, verses 21 and 22. In Isaiah 43, this is us. And Yahweh is speaking here about his last days' work and the last days' witnesses, the 2 witnesses that was promised way back in Genesis. Remember, Yahweh gave his work to Adam, and he said, guard and keep. That was his orders. Guard and keep this way. Well, of course, Adam didn't do it. Yahweh had a long-range plan when he gave this to mankind, knowing full well that mankind was made subject to vanity and easily persuaded. So he, in his long-range plan, after giving this to Adam, he actually allowed the evil to take place, to be nourished and spread. And that's what he's done. And then in Daniel, well, before that, even in Deuteronomy, up until, he uses the word until. Genesis 49 uses the word until certain things take place. And then Yahweh says the governments, what is left of the governments after the great burning, that's all going to be given to the saints of Yahweh. Now that's given in many different places. Daniel shows it, but Genesis 49 also showed it before Daniel did. In Isaiah 43, he starts off saying, but now this is what Yahweh says, who created you, O Jacob, And he who formed you, O Yisrael, you could preach several sermons on that word formed there if you just wanted to write it down and study it. But it took about 6,000 years. Yes, it did. It took about 6,000 years of the planting of genes from Adam on down to the ends of the earth, as Yahweh called it, where he would take his last days work from the ends of the earth. And of course, if you get the picture there, he's talking about, the actual plan of the earth, the reason the earth was created. And of course, when Satan and her gods, who hadn't turned evil but did turn evil shortly after, they all sang for joy at that time, till they found out that the earth was going to be given and all authority given to mankind. and of course, this is where Satan turned against Yahweh, and the gods, of course, had already proved they couldn't handle the job that he had given them. But he told Adam, guard and keep this way. Now, of course, we've been training for a few years here, but before we were born, Yahweh was actually calculating and designing that certain genes, certain characteristics be put in certain genes that would come down to our generation and be taken from the ends of the earth, where a woman would nourish and teach and bring up a child to bring this message today. If you just look at all the planning there and that ends of the earth, and see what Yahweh's actually saying to you. To you. He's saying to you, and the ones he is calling, he says, their names are written in a book, the Lamb's book of life, actually. The Lamb was also prophesied in that Genesis 49. You got to remember these things now. I'm repeating them because I want to get to a certain place to where you got to have this information in order to understand what I want to bring to you today. But the ends of the earth was in the beginning when Yahweh, that was his plan. The end of that is at the ends of the earth. But it started with the breeding that started with Adam and Eve, and then came down to Abraham and the 12 tribes, who this is the family that Yahweh chose to deal with, to bring forth the Savior, Yeshua Messiah, the branch, and the donkeys, as shown in Genesis 49:10. Get all of those scriptures in your mind, and then the scripture, though, that shows that the branch, the witness called the branch, the lampstand, as Revelations 11 shows. You remember that? Revelations 11 shows the lampstand, which is the lampstand, and the two olive trees. That's Revelations 11, and it's referring to the lampstand and the olive trees, previously prophesied in Zechariah, the 6th chapter, where it shows Genesis 49:10 coming into action, the prophecy being fulfilled. Well, of course, to bring that about, he had to have certain genes brought down from Adam and Eve to the ends of the earth, where someone would be born and nourished, brought up, and would be here taking a message, a televised message to, now all this was prophesied, a televised message, not in existence until it was made possible in 1934, the same year that I was made possible, born in 1934, same year that the nuclear bomb started, 1934. All of it came into play at that time, so it would be here now taking his message to all the world. You think how excited Yahweh is to see this being brought about, and he shows us that excitement in the scriptures. But here now, he's talking about the two witnesses, the two lampstands, the two olive trees, the two branches, one of which would talk to the prophets in a televised way. Down through the centuries, the prophets would write it down for the two witnesses to read later. Then you're talking about knowledge. And mankind, he's out here boasting what all he's going to do. They are, but it's all, and this is what I've got to have you understand and make it clear, that Yahweh is in control, and he's bringing this about. And he says, I'm going to guard this thing, he said. But here he's talking now to the two witnesses. This is a message given to Isaiah, who was told by the two witnesses, write this down for us later. They probably didn't tell him that. They just told him what to write. And he wrote it for us. He and Daniel and Zechariah and even Yochanan, the disciple. They all wrote this by instruction of the beginning prophesied people that would do this work in this time period. That's the great, in 10 words or less, this great plan of Yahweh. And he says here then, speaking to these two witnesses, but now, this is what Yahweh says. Who created you, Jacob? Speaking about my brother, Jacob, not the Jacob, the heads of Jacob who did evil all the way down to us and still doing evil, sitting on the 7 hills of Rome. But he's speaking to two brothers here that he reveals later in the next chapter as being brothers. Jacob and he who formed, but now this is what Yahweh says, who created you, O Jacob, and he who formed you, Yisrael, formed you to do this work. Verse 2, when you pass through the waters, if you know this word waters, Yahweh gives you a certain definition of that waters. And look for it. Remember this. And does it compare? And you read that two waters. Well, the waters is multitudes, nations, and tongues that Satan is forming along with this work, because her hope is still her and the God's hope. The actual original sons of Yahweh is shown in Eob, by Eob. It would be well worth your while to really study that book. I'll show you why you really need to study it, not just read it. I'll show you why here, hopefully, in this sermon. But the waters are multitudes, nations, and tongues. I will be with you, and through the rivers they will not overflow you. When you go through these waters, I will be with you. Yahweh says, I will be with you. Get that? He's not just talking to me. He's talking to, in the last days, I will establish my house. House of Yahweh. By starting with the branch, but it's the house of Yahweh here that he's actually speaking to. House of Yahweh, when you walk through the waters, when you pass through the waters, that is multitudes, nations, and tongues, like we're doing right now. We're taking this to the whole world right now. It's available throughout the whole world. I will be with you, and through the rivers, these rivers, they will not overflow you. When you walk, that word walk there is actually work. The word actually means work. It means to teach. It means to carry, to bring out. And of course, if you put this together, the meaning of this word with what our jobs are to do, like in chapter 11 of Revelations, that was the first thing I noticed when the King James Version made out like that the two witnesses were dead. First off, is blowing fire out their nose and mouth. They really painted a great picture there for anyone, all the disbelievers. But I noticed that they'll be taking people out of that time period. The worst time period on the face of the earth is shown in Revelations 11. And I noticed that in the King James Version before the book of Yahweh was even made available. And I said, how could they be dead yet and here working, taking people out of these nations and multitudes and tongues? But that was no mistranslation. That was actually right. And this is some of the things that we were working on after I'd known David Werner for a few years. We kind of formed a study and a straighten out system that where we was working on the King James Version. And Yahweh brought many other elders into this later, and it's grown to what it is today. And of course, the book of Yahweh was made available, which it had to be. Yahweh said it would be, and made available and brought into the work and by the house of Yahweh, and still being produced in our own printing shop. All of this stuff was formed by Yahweh. All of it was in his plan to do this work today. Even this great complication of taking a televised picture of me like Daniel saw to begin with back then, but it wasn't made available by mankind or to mankind until in the 40s. I think about 1941 or something like that, when the televisions were invented. And of course, plans were also made, as you saw in that year, 1947. I would have been 13 years old when Satan started again making plans to destroy me, to destroy you, the house of Yahweh. So Yahweh is here now, assuring you this is not going to take place. He's walking as when you walk, when you work, when you teach. That's, one of the greatest things, the greatest joys that I get now, today, is seeing Isaiah 44 concerning our children, and Yael chapter 2 concerning our children, my children by my seed or by my teaching. You're all my children, and I see y'all teaching and overcoming. Sometimes I cry after confessions, and oh man, I know, yeah, boy. This after confessions, and I hear people confessing, and it's so much better. I'll show you in a little bit, because it's so much better than it was in the days of Eob, because his sons and daughters weren't showing the repentance and conversion, but we're seeing repentance and conversion, confession, repentance, and conversion. And this is what makes it great. And they're willing, to stand up to the world, to whatever they have to do, and already taken that stand. Well, when you walk through these multitudes, nations, and tongues, taking people, teaching, carrying, leading out, through the fires, this fire is going to burn the earth in 1 hour, get rid of all the wicked. The wicked is bringing this on themselves. We have nothing to do with that. The only thing we have to do with it is to warn them before it takes place and then witness what occurs to them because they won't repent of sin and won't turn to Yahweh, because that's the only peaceful solution. This hypocrisy that the Vatican is bringing forth now, pretending they're going to bring peace, they couldn't care less about peace. Doesn't seem like from their action, because the very things they're wanting to put forth is not. It won't bring peace. Netanyahu was right. He saw that it wouldn't bring peace. It's going to bring destruction, and he shut it down. Well, now the Pope is back at it again. The Vatican is. They got their new plans made and to bring this through again. And, of course, we know that it's going to produce war. That's what Revelation shows. Well, fire, you will not be burned. House of Yahweh, you will not be burned. Get that. Nor will the flame kindle upon you. So this is nuclear war now that we're getting ready for right now. The whole world's getting ready for it. Prepare for nuclear war. That's what they're saying. World war. For I am Yahweh, your Father, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. Verse 4, because you were precious in my sight, you have been honorable, and I have loved you, so I will give men for you and people for your life. Fear not. You see this a lot in this work that he's sending us to do, telling us don't fear, don't shut the work down, don't run. Don't try to run and hide. Stay strong and know that this place is going to be protected. Fear not, I am with you. I will bring your seed from the east and gather you from the west. Both directions. They're coming from both directions. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not keep them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Oklahoma. That word daughters don't necessarily mean female, but it means daughters like the two women that refer to the house of Yahweh, daughters of the work of Yahweh. Daughters of the work of Yahweh from the ends of the earth. And remember the sermons that I brought about the ends of the earth, the Oklahoma run. That's right where Yahweh took my family, and that's where I was brought up. Right where the last parts of the earth was being taken. All the way around the globe from where it started. All the way around this ball earth, this earth that is round, and you could go halfway around it and look at it all the way around as you fly around it now. We've been around it. I've been around quite a few times, I think. I looked at the miles that we'd traveled to see leaders of countries, and it amazed me the miles that we had driven in that plane circling the earth. Every once in a while you could look down and you'd be passing an ocean, then some land, and then the ocean, and then some land. Amazing. Yahweh has brought you to the ends of the earth, bringing you from the ends of the earth. That is the teaching that he had planned way back in Genesis. Remember that now. And the person, you get that? Prophesied in Genesis 49. 49:10. The branch. Then he brings that word branch then, that's what he named me, branch, and he shows you in different places how to identify the branch, how to identify his house, what I would be teaching, what I actually taught Daniel before I was born. No, I didn't exist that except in Yahweh's plan. That's all. I didn't exist at that time except in plan and in vision. But the house of Yahweh existed in that plan. Before you were born, Yahweh knew you. Everyone that is called by my name, whom I have created for my glory, whom I have created now for my glory, I have formed, yes, I have made them, the house of Yahweh, for this time period with Yisrael and Jacob. Did you get that? Not just me. You see that? Verse 7. Them, all who are known by my name, and who know my name. Know my name? That don't mean that you just know the name is Yahweh and that's how to pronounce it. It's not talking about pronunciation. It's talking about knowing Yahweh and his righteousness, his character. Knowing, actually know his name. His name stands for perfect righteousness. As for Yahweh, his way is perfect. Remember that. Formed, yes, I have made them. Bring forth. Bring forth. Look, hold your place there and look back up to verse 2. Bring forth. You see that word walk in verse 2? Same thing. Bring forth. Bring forth. It refers, both of them means the same thing. Them, the house of Yahweh, bring forth. Bring forth people. They carry, they teach, they work to do this, to bring forth, to bring out. Bring out the deaf, the blind that has eyes, and the deaf that has ears. Let all the nations. They have ears, but they can't hear until they get to the house of Yahweh and Yahweh opens their mind. It amazes me that people will tell me, well, you know, I can sit through a sermon, but I can't remember what you said. And, well, get your book of Yahweh, get you something to make notes on, and put down the high points, then go back and read it later, study it. Study it, or you can get what I write, what I speak now. The house of Yahweh has made that possible. You, them, you, sitting right here, them, Yahweh just referred to you, has made it possible for you to get what I'm speaking here. You can get it in writing. So you could study it with your scriptures, and pretty soon it'll start registering in your subconscious mind and in your conscious mind. And yes, you will see and understand. You will be able to hear and to see. Let all the nations be gathered together, and let the peoples be assembled. Who among them can declare this? Which one? Who? Who in all the world, all the universe? The gods can't do it. They can't foretell the future. If they could foretell the future, they'd be doing it. They'd have something to brag about then. Right now, the only thing they can brag about is destruction, deception, wars, hatred, what they've brought mankind to do. Who among them can declare this and show us former things? Let them bring forth their witnesses. I'm bringing forth my witnesses, Yahweh says. Now, let them bring forth their witnesses if they can do it. If not, they need to keep their mouth shut. Don't you think? And let the truth be heard. Verse 10, you are my witnesses. Well, that's pretty plain right there. He didn't say maybe. Maybe he said you are, you people here, starting with Jacob and Yisrael. You are, and them, the house of Yahweh, brought from the ends of the earth, Oklahoma, and started here and developed. And I call him the branch, and he will branch out. Look, behold this man, Yahshua. He's going to branch out and build the house of Yahweh. under Yeshua's supervision. That was also prophesied with us in Genesis 49:10. Well, you are my witnesses, says Yahweh, to what? And my servant, you are my witnesses, says Yahweh, and my servants whom I have chosen. My servants. Look down and read verse 7 again. Everyone that is called with my name, whom I have created for my glory, I have formed, yes, I have made them. I have made you, I've formed you. Here is where he forms you, right up here. In this brain and then in your heart. Those two things Yahweh uses to form you to loving him and keeping his laws, statutes, and judgments. I have chosen, you are my witnesses, says Yahweh, and my servants whom I have chosen, so you may know and believe me and understand that I am he. Before me there was no God. Before me there was no God. Even the King James Version has that right. Before me there was no God formed. You got this? Everybody pay attention to this, because I know you're not going to understand it. I'll make you understand it if you'll just listen to me. Before me there was no God formed, and after me, you see that? Well, Yahweh has always existed, so there's nothing. There couldn't be anything before him. He's always been there. You see what he said? But yet he says, before me. The words are used here, before me. And after me, does that mean he's going to die? No. He's going to be forever. The scripture plainly shows that. So how do you figure that out? You know, I've had these arguments back for years, and in college I would get so loud that I'd be waking up the people, and they'd instead of paying attention to what I was saying, they're trying to quieten me down so I wouldn't wake up the dead in there in them rooms. But I said, no, he's not talking about himself here. It's not a mistranslation. It's just they rendered it wrong. But it's talking, if you go back to the start there, it's talking about his prophecies, what he is capable of doing, and his creation there. Verse 10. This verse is speaking of Yahweh. You need to write this down in your book of Yahweh, because you'll be using it. You'll get to it, and then you won't remember what I said. But if take a time after you get home and write down what I said. But down at the bottom, I've got written in my brand new book of Yahweh that's got the be wise all the way through it. This verse is speaking of Yahweh's ability to create and to foretell. That's what he's talking about here. So when they got here, the translators, not having the understanding that Yahweh gives to his people today, they put before and after Yahweh, as if something was occurring out there before Yahweh was. Yahweh has always existed. That's impossible. The scripture shows that. And he will always be here. It's impossible to be after him. No, he's not going to die. Neither is his work. He is speaking, I just read it to you. This verse is speaking of Yahweh's ability to create and to foretell. These words these words referred to his creation and his foretelling. Before me, no gods created anything. That's what he's saying. Before me, no gods created anything. If you read it and study it, you'll see what I'm saying is true. And after me, After my creation, he's saying, after my creation, there shall be no other class of beings formed. After my creation. You see that? It's the only thing that makes sense. Let's see. Did we read verse 12? No. Go back up to verse 11 now. I, even I, am Yahweh, and beside me there is no Savior. I have declared, I have saved, I have showed, and no strange God is among you. You got to be witnesses to this. Read that again. I have declared, I have saved, and I have showed, and that and no strange God is among you. I've showed this to heaven and to earth. Therefore, you are my witnesses. There's no strange gods among you. Otherwise, if you were worshiping gods, if you were making yourself like gods, you wouldn't belong to Yahweh. You'd belong to Satan, the devil. And Yahweh has proved there's no gods. You're not worshiping gods. You're not serving gods. You run from the gods. Therefore, you are my witnesses, says Yahweh, that I am Yahweh. Behold, I will do a new thing now, verse 19. Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it will spring forth. Will you not know it? Yes, he shows you what you're going to do. I will even make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Of course, you know that, and you're standing on it and all. I won't go any further with it. But you belong to Yahweh, and that's what he's telling you in this chapter here. You belong to Yahweh. You don't belong to Satan. Look over to Romans 6, and this makes it perfectly clear if you'll just take it to heart what he's saying here. Romans 6:16. And remember what you just read. You're witnesses that there is no God. There wasn't before Yahweh formed. Before Yahweh formed the earth, there was no gods. Before he created mankind, before he formed us. Us that are sitting here now, that is the finishing of his house. We're the last that's going to be first to receive the authority again. The authority that was offered to Adam, and he blew it. Authority to guard and keep his way. His way is perfect righteousness. And that's the only thing that's ever going to bring peace. And you're going to bring it. You're it. And he's with you. He's with you too. He's going to be with us always now. He's never going to leave us. Verse 16. Do you not know that to whom you yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants you are to whom you obey, whether of sin, which leads to death, sin leads to death, or obedience, which leads to Yahweh or righteousness. Both words mean the same thing, Yahweh or righteousness. And if you go on over, I know I'm out of time, but you got to get this all together in your mind here and keep it there. I haven't got to what I want to get to, but we'll get to it next week, Yahweh willing. 1 John 3:4. 1 John 3:4. And remember what you just read in Romans. And remember, Yahweh says, you belong to him. He formed you. He brought you here from the ends of the earth. That's how you got here. From the ends of the earth, a person was born who would be brought back to the original homestead of his dad and mother and uncles and so forth, brought back to this place that Yahweh protected for you, but he hid me and raised me and formed me so I could bring you here. You'd be brought from the ends of the earth, though not directly from the ends of the earth, That's like being brought from heaven. Yes, you're brought from heaven too. You're actually not physically brought from heaven, but this word comes down from Yahweh to me, who came from the ends of the earth, and I give it to you, bringing you. You're being brought from the ends of the earth to the house of Yahweh in the forest that Yahweh said would be ours. And this is where you are right now, doing the work of Yahweh, reaching out with television that wasn't invented until I think it came in use about 1941, the best I remember. No, maybe so, I don't know. But it's in that time period. So you belong to whom you obey. Now get this in your mind. Yahweh, if you belong to Satan, Yahweh will have nothing to do with you. You cut yourself off from him. You've got to guard yourself as he's taught you to do so. Don't be partaking of the world in any way. Shun those who wants to give you gifts, or we've had people that couldn't give up Halloween, and they drag their children out to burn in the fire. Well, we've had people come here, and they was going to stay till they found out the bomb didn't explode. Well, the war started, I said, on that day. Yeah, but it didn't explode, so they took off back into the world. Well, that proved they loved God more than they loved Yahweh's righteousness. And Yeshua said their deeds are evil. That's the reason that they practice them. They love evil more than righteousness. Well, here now it shows you in no uncertain terms, whosoever commits sin or practices sin. That word commits actually means practices sin. Whoever practices trick-or-treating. I didn't write it plain enough in one of the letters, but I said this is the only reward you're going to get from the gods. You give a trick, you're going to get a trick pulled on you, or you're going to have to pay them for not pulling the trick on you. Well, that's the only reward, is that right there. Whosoever commits sin or practices sin transgresses Yahweh's law. For sin is the transgression of the law. Little children, verse 7, let no man deceive you otherwise now. You just read what sin is. Sin separates you from Yahweh. That's the reason Yeshua had to give his life to buy you back from Satan, by paying your past sins. So prepare yourselves, from the least to the greatest. Prepare yourselves to follow Yahweh perfectly. Little children, let no man deceive you, which this is the deception now that Satan has pulled from the days of Eve up until now. There had to be something to pull a group out of that. Noah was the only person that Yahweh set in his genes to be righteous. He formed Noah and that few people, that few in his family. The flood got the rest of them. Little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous. You're classified as righteous if you practice it. I don't mean you're perfectly practicing it, but you're practicing it and will become perfect if you'll keep it up. He who commits or practices sin is of the devil. And Yahweh will have nothing to do with people who practice sins. I'll show you that in Eob. He who commits sin is of the devil. For the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of Yahweh was manifest, that he might destroy the works of the devil. The works of the devil are plainly shown in Revelations 13, and you're fixing to see it go into full force, looks like, from what we're getting from the news. It's here, it's time, and you're going to see what takes place when this is forced. In verse 10 here, he says, in this, the children of Yahweh are manifest. The children of Yahweh and the children of the devil are made known. They're made known by what they practice. Hitler knew the children of Yahweh by what they practiced, and he killed everyone he could possibly kill. Somewhere around 6 million, they claim. Titus knew the same thing, and he tried to wipe them out, all of them. History says they killed about 3 million. Others say they killed a lot more than that, but he said 3 million. In this, the children of Yahweh and the children of the devil are made known, manifest. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of Yahweh, nor does he love his neighbor. Yahweh's laws teach love. We love. We practice the laws that bring love, like don't steal, don't kill, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't commit fornication. Practice it 24 hours a day. For this is the message that you heard from the beginning. Same message given to Adam and Eve, and Yahweh says, guard and keep this way. Now that's going to be given actual authority. It's going to be given unto us to guard this and keep this throughout all eternity. We're the ones that will be first to receive that authority that was offered to Adam and Eve. For this is the message you heard from the beginning. Not as Cain. Cain was a murderer. He cut himself off from Yahweh. I didn't get as far as I wanted to, but Yahweh willing, take up next week on this. And watch the news. Remember the news that was brought. We're not making this up. It's not fake news. This is the real thing you're seeing here, and the prophecies are being fulfilled at this time, and Yahweh's house is being formed. Yahweh's house is doing its work. Yahweh is with us as we're doing this work. It's going to get kind of shaky, but with what you know and determine in advance what you're going to do, you won't let anyone put fear in you. If you'll just keep these things in mind, their way is not going to last. Their way, they're going to kill themselves pretty rapidly. This is, it's already in the works, so it's not going to take a long time for this to take place. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the service back to the next leader. I love you.